So who knows what a compost toilet is? Yeah? So essentially what a compost toilet is, it's a toilet where you compost our pee and our poo. And a lot of people have a really strong reaction against this. I was out last year with my sister-in-law and my brother, and I was somewhat jokingly, somewhat serious, telling them that my view, if I could be in a relationship with somebody, is would they use a compost toilet? And my sister-in-law was horrified, and the blood drained from her face. And my brother was just sitting there, and he shakes his head, and he goes, yeah, you're going to die alone. But the reason that I'm passionate about compost toilets is, for me, they illustrate the insanity of our society. We take two essential elements that are essential for life on Earth, water and soil, which is poo after we compost it. Separately, they're essential for life, but we mix them together and we create a pollutant and all sorts of problems downstream. So we've got a design flaw. And I would argue it's the same design flaw that allows the 26 richest people in the world accumulate the same amount of wealth as over half the world's population. It's the same design flaw that destroys ecosystems and wipes out plants and animals. And it's the same design flaw that's changing our climate. And so what is this flaw? I would argue that all, if not most, all of the issues we face are an illusion of separability. We believe we're separate from each other, and we believe we're separate from wider nature. I say wider nature because sometimes we talk about humans and nature, but it's a misnomer because we're not separate. We are nature. It's not us and nature. We're completely part of it. And this false view is the same view that allows us to treat refugees and migrants as we do, and the planet. And I seen this very clearly last year. I was in my mother's house and I was doing some work in the garden for her, and I had a fresh pile of freshly brewed cow manure. And she came out to me and she handed me a thing of flowers that she wanted to get rid of. And I took them over and I threw them over my shoulder into the pile. And the one flower that was still in bloom landed perfectly upright in the cow manure. And I had this moment where I realized that one thing we consider disgusting, the other we consider beautiful, yet they're both going to break down, as I will, as every one of you will. We'll go back into the soil and we'll go back into nature, and the cycle will continue. We're not separate from nature, we are completely linked. So that's the problem, but what are possibly some of the solutions? So I've recently bought a piece of land. We're going to call it Síolta an Crí, Seeds of the Heart. Because I'm not particularly interested in sustainability. I believe much more in regeneration, a space where people, the wider planet, communities, can not just sustain, but actually regenerate. And we can regenerate ecosystems, we can regenerate wider nature. There was a recent piece of research done looking at the most comprehensive ways to reverse climate change. 8 out of the top 20 were around food, and 12 out of the top 20 were around land use. The top one is our current way of working. We take forests, we plough it up, we overgraze it, and then we become barren lands. And that affects people, biodiversity, livelihoods. But there is an alternative. We can take barren lands and regenerate them, building ecosystems, sustainable livelihoods, and reverting climate change. We can pull carbon from the air and put it in the soils. We can build biodiversity back up. We can reforest Ireland, and we can revert climate change. Ireland is predominantly an agricultural country. And so with this space in Monaghan, what we're going to do is we're going to practice a thing called permaculture. Permaculture means permanent culture. And it's very wide. It can mean economics, it can mean societal. But for the rest of this, I'm going to focus on food because, as I said, Ireland is a predominantly an agricultural society and we all need to eat. And agriculture is often put as one of the most damaging causes and impacts on climate change. But I would argue that it's not agriculture, it's the way we practice it. So what are the alternatives? So this here is what's called a food forest. If we all disappeared from Ireland today, what would happen is the land would gradually succeed and become a forest. Nature wants to be a forest. And as long as we're fighting against nature and not working with it, we're going to be fighting a losing battle. So, what are some systems, regenerative systems, that can, as I said, pull the carbon, feed ourselves? And this is a food forest. So what a food forest is, it's got 7 layers. The first layer is the big tree. It could be nuts or fruit. And then there's a smaller tree, which is maybe the first one's about 25 foot. The next one's maybe 12. Then there's a fruit bush. Then there is herbs, and then root, and then climbers. So there's not competition, but cooperation. Forests don't need any external input. They're completely regenerative, and they sustain themselves. What would it look like if we practiced our systems, our food systems, like this, that builds nature, builds people, instead of depleting it? There was another research done recently that said one of the most, if not the most effective way of reverting climate change, we could sequester 10 years worth of human-made climate change by massively reforesting the globe. The argument beside that is sometimes put, well, we need to eat. But this is a system that not only sequesters carbon, not only builds biodiversity, but creates jobs, regenerates community with fresh, sustainable food that's much more climate sensitive or more resilient to potential climate change issues than our monoculture way. So I would invite you to plant trees, plant foods, do what you can do. You might say, well, what can I do? I'm only an individual. What's the point? But for me, that's the wrong question. A more appropriate question is, do you want to be part of the problem? Or do you want to be part of the solution? Thank you.